Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are confident in Ukraine's victory and promise to do everything possible for it. Republicans urge Zelensky to stay away. Russia persists in nuclear blackmail and provocations while preparing for a potential strike on its territory with long-range weapons. We are talking about this right now. Valeriy Klochok, head of the Center for Public Analysis, Vezha. Valeria, greetings, glad to see you. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Greetings, always glad to see and hear you. Biden and Kamala Harris found time for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Biden confirmed a substantial aid package for Ukraine worth $8 billion, including an initial $2.4 billion. He stated that the U.S. would support Ukraine until it prevails. In the conflict, and outlined key points to strengthen Ukraine in potential future negotiations. We must now strengthen Ukraine's position on the battlefield, and we are looking to the future to help Ukraine succeed in the long term. Let's hear briefly from the head of the White House. Let me be clear. Russia will not win this war. Russia will not win. Ukraine will win, and we will continue to support you every step of the way. The United States is looking ahead to help Ukraine succeed in the long run. This summer, the Ukraine Compact was launched, uniting over 20 countries dedicated to Ukraine's long-term security. Alongside more than 30 countries in the EU, the U.S. issued a joint declaration to support, restore, and reconstruct Ukraine. With these actions, we are making it clear that we support Ukraine now and in the future. Valeriy, the New York Times reports that Zelensky's star power in Washington is waning. During his December 2022 visit, he received a warm welcome, including a standing ovation and nearly $50 billion in aid. However, now he faces a much quieter reception and angry questions from some Republicans urging him to stay away. Have we seen a change and strengthening of the vector of support from the current administration? Why is there such resistance from the Republicans? But still, there is a meeting between Zelensky and Trump to take place after certain nuances, and we are also waiting for it and will discuss it. Do our Western partners have a feeling that this war could last a long time? To make it shorter, we need to help as much and as quickly as possible. With all due respect to you, indeed, this is all correct. It should be considered unambiguously in the complex. But let's try to break it down for the audience, because one can get confused in all these turmoil on the capitalist hills. I was particularly triggered, as the fashionable term goes, by the New York Times. I've been pretty normal about them for a long time, and I've heard comments and opinions from colleagues that the New York Times is just hitting rock bottom. But today's two publications are actually a confirmation that they have broken through the bottom. There seems to be nowhere else to fall. But I think they will fall further. And it's a pity that these materials are republished by central portals in Ukraine. They are read by a lot of people. When you open, I'm not going to name names now, so as not to sow discord in the journalistic environment. But I just point out, when they highlight in the main headlines, in red headlines, that Zelensky's star is fading. You said it right. In 22, he was given $50 billion, and now he has only $8. And in the same newspaper today, there's a story that American intelligence
заголовками, червоними заголовками, що все, Зеленського зірка згасає. Ви правильно сказали, в 22-му році йому дали 50 мільярдів, а тепер дали лише 8. І в цій же газеті виходить сьогодні матеріал про те, що американська розвідка
is quite critical of allowing Ukraine to strike at Russian territory, as this could lead to an even greater escalation. We have been hitting Russia for a long time. It has been more than a month now that there has been a change in Ukraine. We can be told that the Russians in the east and south are occupying some villages, but there has been no strategic breakthrough anywhere. This is a fact as far as Zelensky's star is concerned. Whoever said that in the third year of the war, the attitude towards Ukraine would be the same as in the first. I'm sorry, this is absolutely the logic of any geopolitics. When you get used to war, I think it's normal that today Europe is paying more for the war in Ukraine than the United States of America in proportion. And this is good, it should be so. Europe, I'm sorry, but in this part I support Trump, that Europe should be more pragmatic in terms of allocating more money for defense. This publication, in my opinion, is far from the truth. It is most likely a manipulation of facts. But the New York Times is the New York Times, so I think we can leave it. As for the other reports, it is true that military assistance from the United States of America in the amount of $8 billion, of which 2.4 have already been confirmed, may seem less than in the first year and weak. But we must understand that our capabilities are growing significantly. Despite reduced U.S. assistance compared to the first year, we can still resist Russian aggression more effectively than in 2022. This detail often gets overlooked. A journalist might have received an editorial directive to write negatively, but today The Guardian presents a different perspective, highlighting European concerns about Trump's potential return to power and the possibility of reduced aid. Accordingly, conclusions must be drawn. It is no coincidence that Joseph Biden is convening of the Ramstein Group in Germany on October 12th to develop further mechanisms to help Ukraine. This is all being transferred to Europe, and this is normal. But of course, we need to show that everything is gone. I see that even now in Ukraine, apart from the central portals, journalists and experts are saying that everything is lost. I followed Zelensky's visit with caution, anticipating that something might go wrong. The incident involving Trump visiting the Pennsylvania plant is a classic political maneuver unrelated to Ukraine, akin to a soap opera. We discussed this situation with colleagues yesterday, and it highlights how such stories can overshadow real issues. When the military Zelensky went to the plant in Utah earlier, everything was fine, because there were Republicans there. No one was making a fuss among the Democrats. Now the Trumpists, I emphasize, the Trumpists, are creating this scandal, sucking it out of their fingers, and want to show that if we help Ukraine, American children will go to fight in Ukraine. Trump is aware that both Republican and Democratic policies aim to prevent American children from fighting in Ukraine. Senior U.S. officials view their mission as a success, focusing on defeating the Russians without losing American soldiers. Their strategy won't change. And while we must consider U.S. interests in the context of Ukraine, we should reject the narrative that America instigated this war through Russia. It's important to remember that since 1991, we've made our own choices, and we should examine our past actions rather than attributing blame solely to the U.S. І не плутати наратив, який зараз поширюється, що це, мовляв, Америка розв'язала війну проти України руками Росії. Ну це бред, маячня сивої кобили, вибачте. Я бачу зараз таке несеться і в коментарях і так далі. В усіх гріхах ми винимо американців і таке інше. Ну, по-перше, нам варто було б згадати з 91-го року, куди ми подівали всі свої танки. This is a big topic that needs to be raised, and we need to determine who should be responsible for this. Secondly, we need to do what we are doing now, slowly, and do it faster, to increase our own weapons production, so that we won't have to ask anyone where to strike, although there are certain agreements in place. And of course, thirdly, we need to understand that our entire history in the United States today will not be the same as in the first year, for sure. The fact that we are now actually reaching the final stage of meetings with high-ranking officials to establish contacts with both parties is a real positive. The fact that we are getting money is also positive. It is important to understand that military assistance from the United States will continue to come as long as the Democrats remain in power. Perhaps, to summarize this issue, I would like to emphasize once again that the main outcome of Zelensky's meeting with Trump, Kamala Harris, and Joseph Biden was the following. As well as meetings with congressmen, representatives of both parties, etc., is to convey the message that Ukraine needs to be supported, that Putin's red lines are not working, that we can put pressure on him and convince our Western partners at this stage that we really should not be afraid of Russia. However, we cannot hope that tomorrow the White House will announce a plan for some kind of palace coup in Russia, where others will come to power and destroy this Russia. Our interests do not yet coincide, but we are gradually moving towards this. We can already state that this visit was quite successful and gave us confidence, even if not in the next year, but in the future, for sure. I can't say that he was successful there at all. We had a little bit too high expectations. I believe that the office has built the communication incorrectly. He has harmed himself, because by calling the victory plan a victory plan, many people have formed the opinion that after it is agreed upon, we will destroy Putin and Russia will capitulate. This is my assessment, and it coincides with the opinions of many of my colleagues. The office has a different point of view, but the main result of Zelensky's visit to the General Assembly, first of all, is the contacts with many leaders that took place. He met with Scholz, also with Starmer, and by the way, with Trump. The most important task that was achieved, in my opinion, was to raise the Ukrainian issue to the top of the agenda of global geopolitics. I believe that this was done, given the number of publications that appeared in the Western press. Secondly, we have managed to convince Russia that no one is afraid of them, because Putin's recent statement on nuclear doctrine indicates reliance on increasing mobilization and issuing more nuclear threats. The nuclear threats are clear to everyone, and there is the problem of what to do with North Korea, as Anthony Blinken said, because even Iran is trying to talk to us. The situation remains challenging, but over the next 6 months we expect significant security support, including $8 billion in military assistance from the U.S. Other countries will follow suit, as evidenced by Germany's recent announcement of an additional 400 million euros for Ukraine. This comes despite earlier claims that Germany had exhausted its funding. All these funds will bolster Ukraine's military efforts. The UK is announcing the transfer of additional self-propelled artillery systems to us. That is, this cushion is there. On top of that, I'm really looking forward to the decision that we will not receive $35 billion in unconditional loans from the G7 countries. This $15 billion is the subject of a conversation with the White House, and I think that hopefully, at least in the coming days, we will hear a clear articulation that we will already have this $50 billion. Because, as we can see, the economy in Ukraine is unfortunately not working out, and the government is not willing to make any effective decisions regarding economic reform. This situation provides us with a safety net. I'm cautiously optimistic about potential changes at the front due to our upcoming long-range bombs and an expanded pilot training program. The Kremlin is aware that Ukraine is receiving this support, and I believe there's a decision to lift restrictions, even if it isn't openly discussed. The Russians understand this clearly. Putin's nuclear strategy and media stunts reflect their panic over incoming support, particularly the $8 billion from the U.S., which translates into more tanks and equipment renewal for Ukraine. As our equipment gets destroyed, it must be replaced, and the need for renewal is urgent. China's involvement adds another significant layer to this situation. I apologize for my strong emotions regarding Zelensky's visit and the General Assembly. When Lula da Silva and Wang Yi made their statements, it wasn't Lula, but a Brazilian. Foreign Ministry representative, alongside his Chinese counterpart, who announced the creation of a new peace platform called the Friends of Peace. They aim to promote their Sino-Brazilian plan. Although these countries maintain neutrality, they are being urged to advocate for peace and send a clear message to Putin that continuing the fight is unwise. And the fact that today, the Western press says that by the end of the year, the prerequisites for negotiations will have been formed is becoming more and more obvious. Now, the most important thing is that all these weapons, 8 billion and others, reach us as quickly as possible, and that we change the situation on the front line significantly, at least at the tactical level. Valerie, you've highlighted an important aspect regarding China. Russian gatekeepers and their so-called political scientists are in disarray, claiming that Ukraine has suddenly become a strategic partner of China, with Beijing aiming to restore top-tier relations. This situation is seen as a stab in the back for Russia. We joke that it's a stab in the back and the head, reflecting the ongoing shifts in alliances among these countries. We have already talked a bit about Iran this week and about China, how painful and revealing it is now, not only for the military leaders, but also for the Kremlin elite. What will they do? Is there only the DPRK left? You know, the situation with China is not as clear-cut as the military leaders write, because they say that everything is lost there. Nothing is lost yet. China remains a strategic partner of Russia, but not an ally. It's crucial to recognize that many Russians mistakenly believe China is their ally, whereas China has never sought allies and will not in the future. They refer to partners, not allies. China will engage in joint military programs and exercises, maintaining good relations with the Kremlin regardless of who is in power, be it Mishustin, Shoigu, Putin, or others. Russia had hoped, particularly at the mid-level, that China might influence the Istanbul agreements. But at a certain point, even Russia agreed to the Sino-Brazilian peace plan, which differs from the Istanbul agreements, except for the annexes, because I don't see any annexes to the Sino-Brazilian peace plan, at least they are not mentioned. We shouldn't count on China being our strategic partner either, because Zelensky's response to his peace initiative was quite harsh. I thought that she would get a tougher response from Beijing, but it was quite mild. We will see what is behind it, because unfortunately, our relations with China are not developing as we would like. Currently, our relations with India are somewhat improved, although it's premature to discuss future prospects. This may be in contrast to the recent joint statement from China and Brazil about a platform aimed at uniting the global South to end the war. Interestingly, they claim they are not competing, yet it clearly indicates competition. An alternative negotiation platform is emerging, but I doubt it will unfold as per Chinese scenarios. This indicates that China is trying to maintain a limited number of countries of the global South to influence geopolitics in general. Today, they have been able to cover only one country, Pakistan. Although we have to wait until Friday, because on Friday they are planning to sign, I'm not privy to all the details, some kind of joint statement which should have 20 countries, because they wrote other countries. If no document appears, it will signal the collapse of China's initiative. This will be a positive moment for us, but there is another significant nuance. The fact is that during the discussion that took place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Andriy Sybiga and Andriy Yermak met with Wang, where they exchanged, let's say, mutual curtsies, but expressed their willingness to cooperate further.
Але сказали про те, що готові співпрацювати далі. Тобто не побили горшками повністю з ними. Це добре. От якраз на цьому моменті
That is, we have not completely broken relations with them, which is good. This is the positive aspect, although, again, we will see how our relations develop further. The halt in Chinese component supplies for our drones creates an unattractive situation, complicating logistics and increasing costs. We need to address this issue through third countries, which delays our efforts amid Russian aggression. It's crucial for our diplomats navigating the Chinese relationship to recognize our limited experience with China, despite past trade reaching $10 billion in better times. We must seek common ground with China while also cooperating with India and Turkey, despite my dislike for their leaders' support of Russia. This world is cruel and cynical, so we need to prioritize our own benefits. I hope to maintain our current relationships, and Zelensky may even meet with Xi Jinping. For now, I remain cautious about the Chinese and Brazilian situations. It has only one positive aspect. China is still being encouraged to put pressure on Russia. There is no reason to say that this will be some kind of economic pressure, because the most important success in Sino-Russian relations for us will be secondary sanctions against China. We are setting contours and watching how they expand or contract. Thank you for your insights. We are now facing our own challenges related to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Recent reports suggest that President Zelensky is contemplating presidential elections in 2025 due to declining ratings, although no sources are cited. Yulia Tymoshenko, leader of Batkivshina, has indicated that the political process is underway, despite earlier decisions to postpone elections until after the war. The Ukrainian president is reportedly considering presidential elections next year, possibly to strengthen his power. However, I've heard your explanations that holding elections during wartime, with constant attacks and shelling, is impractical. This morning, for instance, Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhzhia, and Kharkiv are again under fire. How can elections be held under such conditions, and is it advisable? Elections have been discussed for some time, particularly in the context of a large-scale war. Initially, there was significant rhetoric from the authorities emphasizing that holding elections was impossible. This constant insistence has led many in Ukrainian society to believe that elections cannot be conducted. While it is indeed challenging to hold elections during wartime, there are global precedents for doing so. Let me remind you that Ukraine has already held 4 national elections and local elections since the beginning of the war, because we forget that the war in Ukraine began in 2014. We have not held elections in the temporarily occupied Crimea since 2014, as well as in certain regions of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. However, MPs from these regions were elected to the Verkhovna Rada on party lists, and they are even in the parliament today. I do not rule out that a one-time law will be adopted for the elections. My colleagues and I have already discussed this within the center, because it should have exceptions for example, martial law. There is a problem, first, with the register, because there are a lot of people abroad, and they will not be able to join the election process. That is, they need to be given the right to vote and be elected. And thirdly, of course, security. I do not rule out that a one-time law will be adopted in the parliament to hold elections. My colleagues and I at the center have already discussed this because it should have exceptions for example, martial law. There is a problem first with the registry because there are a lot of people abroad, and this makes it difficult for them to join the election process. That is, we need to ensure their right to vote and be elected. Third, of course, is security. As for the parliament, they may even return to closed party lists to ensure maximum representation in this 450-member legislative body, so as not to violate the constitution. The only issue is that here, again, we have a certain prohibition, a ban on holding elections under martial law. But some ad hoc decisions, that is, deviations from the rules, can be applied. The article appeared in The Economist because there is an ongoing discussion about resetting the government in Ukraine. Ultimately, it depends on the Ukrainian people's decision, but it's crucial to show that democratic principles can be upheld even in wartime. This won't be easy, but it's worth noting that President Volodymyr Zelensky supported the idea of holding presidential elections during a summer Q&A with foreign journalists. While I can't recall the specific publication, this information is available online. He said that, yes, I am ready for the elections, and if the situation is such that they need to be held under martial law, we will think about how to do it. But there are definitely more questions than answers here. And what I see is that the reaction of society is rather, let's say, reactive, but we cannot rule it out. As for Yulia Tymoshenko's comment, it could have been anyone. Since this comment was made by politicians, of course, Yulia Vladimirovna was addressed with such a comment. While she didn't reveal any secrets, it's clear that political forces have been preparing for elections for some time, measuring ratings and looking for the right moment to launch their campaigns. This is evident from both the president's office and the opposition, with mutual criticism apparent in their posts. Those in the know are aware that this has been ongoing since the start of the large-scale invasion. This may seem cruel in a time of war, but politicians are cynical. They have always been and will always be, not only in Ukraine but all over the world. That's why ratings are really important to them, and they are now supporting them with all sorts of volunteer activities. Just look at this. Everyone is at a low start. Another thing I thought about was whether this will lead to a global reset. After all, during the large-scale invasion, no new powerful political forces emerged. I don't agree that military personnel can form the basis for political forces. Strong political figures have emerged, such as Zaluzhny and Kirilo Budanov, despite ongoing scandals that are not yet fully visible. Other volunteer groups, like Prytulas, might withdraw, allowing new political forces to enter the scene. For instance, Hudymenko has also come up in discussions, with public information linking his project to the fifth president, Petro Poroshenko. That is, we will see many new faces, but unfortunately, we will also see old pro-Russian political forces trying to get to power, because today they are present in the information field, spreading pro-Russian narratives. They are hidden. This is how we have just talked about how the Americans started a war against Ukraine because they do not give us weapons. This is idiocy of the highest order. When I hear that this war is beneficial to the Americans, it is not. They are pursuing their own interests, and it was not the Americans who started fighting against us. You have to understand this. Let's not manipulate these things. These are facts that are happening. Look at how much criticism the opposition political forces are now voicing against the government for making wrong decisions. This is often constructive criticism, but there was no signal in 2022. In 2023 and 2024, we just hear it everywhere. The government is like this. The government is talking at the opposition. They don't understand.
лунає від опозиційних політичних сил на адресу влади за те, що рішення неправильні і таке інше, часто конструктивної і правильної критики. Але з такого і сили сигналу у 22-му році не було. 23-й, 24-й рік, це просто...
These battles, I hear, are a classic of political confrontation, both in peacetime and in 2014.
Ці баталії я чую, класика політичного протистояння, як то в мирний час, як і було 2014 року.
Mr. Valeriy, thank you for these clarifications and for explaining all the topics we have discussed today. You are always clear and professional. Thank you for this picture of the day and this week. We will see you on Monday. Take care, see you, and good luck. We're very pleased, so don't be shy. Let's keep it up. Please subscribe to Valeriy's YouTube. The active link is in the description below this video. There's even more analytics there. And also subscribe to YouTube on the 24th. We are moving towards 8 million. Take care of yourself. Believe in the armed forces of Ukraine. We will win.